Hi, my name is Supertrin, and today I'm going to be talking about the Kwaito people. Starting off to define and describe the genre, the Kwaito music is often inconsistent, but it's more of a dance type of beat. There are raps in there, and there is a bubblegum and a little bit of makanga mix in there. And mostly it's the instruments they use are synthesizers, drum machines, and a lot of mixing. Okay. And in the music, they could be talking about like cars, money, clothes, and a lot of the new luxuries of the world. And some important musicians that associated with was first the Mongol Muffin. It was a group of Kwaito singers who was pioneering the genre at the time, and they won a lot of medals. Okay. Another group was the Mendoza. They created a newer generation of Kwaito stars, and an important producer in the Mendoza group was Gaby Leroux. Another person who had a career established with the help of Gaby Leroux was Zola. They were very popular, and through researching you can see they went on to be in TV shows like Yizo Yizo. And another very important aspect of the Kwaito group was Boon Shaka. Boon Shaka was a group of Kwaito singers, and one of the members called Boza, he actually later declared himself to be the king of Kwaito, which was very interesting. Moving on to the second question. Luis Mientes writes about how race, gender, and class importance impacts relationships between people in South Africa recording studios, and to find a moment in her article when this is made clear. A page I found that talked about this in one of the linked readings was on page 84. On page 84, Mientes talks about how in the ideal studio scenario, the producer directs the session and the engineer serves the producer. But as you can see reading into it, that this is completely the opposite. During the apartheid era South African studios part, the division of labor was reversed, where an engineer, quoted, usually white, middle class, and male, wielded, quote unquote, significantly more power working the controls of the console. And then you can see another quote saying, quote unquote, usually black, male, and representing an upwardly mobile class fraction with a thoroughly urban lifestyle, meaning there was a disadvantage clearly in the control room due to their color and their understanding of the technological access. And then also you can see their gender. Okay, moving on to the next question. Describe how race and gender and or class are impactful at this moment to do so. What expectations do people have of each other? And so we're going to be talking about the expectations first. So the first expectation was a racial expectation where the white and middle class and male engineers had more power, and so they had more say in how things operated. Okay. The second expectation was linguistic. So the white engineers and or like staff/managers in the studio rooms, they often dominated the technological language of the studio. They didn't have knowledge of the African culture and many of the black music styles like makanga or Kwaito. And so this meant they wanted to become more linguistically exclusive of English or whatever Western languages used in the studio, so they had a sense of control. And so it overrid a lot of the local languages like the Zulu speaking musicians and all the other local groups, because they didn't understand their language. Another expectation was gender. So women that were assistants, for example, one was an assistant engineer of Loana, they were expected to occupy a diminished technical role, like a small machine. You know what I mean? This highlights that there was an expectation of women on their gender regardless of their position as assistant engineers. And so you could see expectations of racial, linguistic, and gender being into play. Another question talks about the power dynamics that are at play between people of different races and genders and class backgrounds. To talk about the power dynamics, you pull back from the answers earlier mentioned, you can see that technology was really important. The local people didn't understand the technology, and so the engineers used that aspect to gain control over the direction of the music and how the control room was flowing. They also didn't understand the linguistic aspect of the studio, and so they asserted their power there by changing certain words and how things are said. For example, one engineer, he changed the pronunciation of one musical term like isiki. And moving on to the next question, what is unique and what is not unique? One aspect that's very unique is you can see how over time the power imbalance and all of these certain biases, it results in studio relationships, quote-unquote, strong traces of apartheid studio practices. You can see that the state-sanctioned denial of technological training and access to black citizens meant that white engineers had more authority backed by unique political structures to maintain professional segregation, which led to a lot of the downfall of innovation and a lot of the downfall of progression in these music genres. And you could see it was still rooted over time. Not something that's not unique. There was a lot of marginalization. And for example, the Loanna, as the assistant engineer example, she was denied access to manipulate the controls of these technological aspects, which was denied from her because of her gender and her race and the language she spoke. And it reflects a very global issue nowadays of how there's a lot of impact from people's gender and race and language towards their impact in the studio session, which is wrong because they're trying to communicate. And so that is my answer. I apologize if it is a bit over the time limit, but I really wanted to communicate all the points I had to share. Thank you.